All right, folks, the January 6th committee laid out what they believe to be the origins of the violence at the U.S. Capitol that took place on January 6, 2021. Today, members of the committee used video testimony and live witnesses to describe what Donald Trump did and his call to action in a December tweet. Plans by far-right white extremist groups to descend on Washington like the Oath Keepers and efforts by the White House advisors to urge Trump to drop his false claims of election fraud. The hearings began with Chairman Benny Thompson.
Good afternoon. When I think about the most basic way to explain the importance of elections in the United States, there's a phrase that always comes to mind. It may sound straightforward, but it's meaningful. We settle our differences at the ballot box. Sometimes my choice prevails, sometimes yours does, but it's that simple. We cast our votes, we count the votes. If something seems off with the results, we can challenge them in court, and then we accept the results. When you're on the losing side, that doesn't mean you have to be happy about it. And in the United States, there's plenty you can do and say so. You can protest, you can organize, you can get ready for the next election to try to make sure your side has a better chance the next time the people settle their differences at the ballot box. But you can't turn violent. You can't try to achieve your desired outcome through force or harassment or intimidation. Any real leader who sees their supporters going down that path, approaching that line, has a responsibility to say, stop. We gave it our best. We came up short. We try again next time, because we settle our differences at the ballot box. On December 14th, 2020, the presidential election was officially over. The Electoral College had cast its vote. Joe Biden was the president-elect of the United States. By that point, many of Donald Trump's supporters were already convinced that the election had been stolen, because that's what Donald Trump had been telling them. So what Donald Trump was required to do in that moment, what would have been required of any American leader, was to say, we did our best and we came up short. He went the opposite way. He seized on the anger he had already stoked among his most loyal supporters, and as they approached the line, he didn't wave them off, he urged them on. Today, the committee will explain how, as a part of his last-ditch effort to overturn the election and block the transfer of power, Donald Trump summoned a mob to Washington, D.C., and ultimately spurred that mob to wage a violent attack on our democracy.
Now, you might remember, again, Donald Trump made his call to action, and it was followed and echoed by many of his nutcase followers.
Saturday, December 19th, the year is 2020, and one of the most historic events in American history has just taken place. President Trump, in the early morning hours today, tweeted that he wants the American people to march on Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021.
And now Donald Trump is calling on his supporters to descend on Washington, D.C., January 6th.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
We're going to only be saved by millions of Americans moving to Washington, occupying the entire area, if necessary, storming right into the Capitol. You know, we know the rules of engagement. If you have enough people, you can push down any kind of a fence or a wall.
This could be Trump's last stand. And it's a time when he has specifically called on his supporters to arrive in D.C. That's something that may actually be the big push Trump supporters need to say, this is it. It's now or never.
You better understand something, son. You better understand something. Red wave, bitch. Red wave. This is going to be a red wedding going down January 6th.
On that day, Trump says, show up for a protest it's gonna be wild. And based on what we've already seen from the previous events, I think Trump is absolutely correct.
Motherfucker, you better look outside. You better look out. January 6th. Kick that fucking door open. Look down the street. There's going to be 1 million plus geeked up armed Americans.
The time for games is over. The time for action is now. Where were you when history called? Where were you when you and your children's destiny and future was on the line?
We know where you were, getting ready to go to jail. Now, Congresswoman Liz Cheney, she said, can we stop this idea that Donald Trump is like a little child, didn't know what was going on? She says, nah, that thug was responsible.
This appears to have changed the strategy for defending Donald Trump. Now the argument seems to be that President Trump was manipulated by others outside the administration, that he was persuaded to ignore his closest advisors, and that he was incapable of telling right from wrong. This new strategy is to try to blame only John Eastman or Sidney Powell or Congressman Scott Perry or others, and not President Trump. In this version, the president was, quote, poorly served by these outside advisors. The strategy is to blame people his advisors called, quote, the crazies for what Donald Trump did. This, of course, is nonsense. President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. Just like everyone else in our country, he is responsible for his own actions and his own choices.
More like a 76-year-old child. Now, there was a Twitter whistleblower who said, you know what? If it was anybody else but this fool, they would have been kicked off that platform.
What was your gut feeling on the night of January 5th?
I believe I sent a Slack message to someone that said something along the lines of, when people are shooting each other tomorrow, I will try and rest in the knowledge that we tried. And so I went to, I don't know that I slept that night, to be honest with you. I was on pins and needles because, again, for months, I had been begging and anticipating and attempting to raise the reality that if we made no intervention into what I saw occurring, people were going to die. And on January 5th, I realized no intervention was coming. And even as hard as I had tried to create one or implement one, there was nothing, and we were at the whims and the mercy of a violent crowd that was locked and loaded.
And just for the record, this was content that was echoing statements by the former president, but also Proud Boys and other known violent extremist groups.
Yeah.
Now, folks, Congressman Jamie Raskin really sort of just laid out in full detail what was taking place leading up to January 6th, especially in this crazy nutcase meeting that took place in the White House on December 18th.
The startling conclusion is this: even an agreed upon complete lack of evidence could not stop President Trump, Mark Meadows, and their allies from trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election. So let's return to that meeting at the White House on the evening of December 18. That night, a group showed up at the White House, including Sidney Powell, retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and former Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne. After gaining access to the building from a junior White House staffer, the group made their way to the Oval Office. They were able to speak with the president by himself for some time until White House officials learned of the meeting. What ensued was a heated and profane clash between this group and President Trump's White House advisors, who traded personal insults, accusations of disloyalty to the president, and even challenges to physically fight. The meeting would last over 6 hours, beginning here in the Oval Office, moving around the West Wing, and many hours later, ending up in the president's private residence. The Select Committee has spoken with 6 of the participants, as well as staffers who could hear the screaming from outside the Oval Office. What took place next is best told in their own words, as you will see from this video.
Did you believe that it was going to work, that you were going to be able to get to see the president without an appointment?
I had no idea.
In fact, you did get to see the president without an appointment.
We did.
How much time did you have alone with the president? And I say alone, you had other people with you, but
right
from his aides before the crowd came running?
Probably no more than 10 or 15 minutes.
Was in that...
I bet Pat Cipollone set a new land speed record.
I got a call either from Molly or Hirschman that I need to get to the Oval Office.
So that was the first point that I had recognized, okay, there was nobody in there from the White House. Mark's gone. What's going on right now?
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office.
Explain why.
Well, again, I don't think they were providing. Well, first of all, the overstock person, I've never knew who this guy was. Actually, the first thing I did, I walked in, I looked at him, and I said, "Who are you?" And he told me. I don't think any of these people were providing the president with good advice, and so I didn't understand how they had gotten in.
In the short period of time that you had with the president, did he seem receptive to the presentation that you were making?
He was very interested in hearing particularly about the CISA finding and the terms of 13848 that apparently nobody else had bothered to inform him of.
I was asking, like, you claiming the Democrats were working with Hugo Chavez, Venezuelans, and whomever else. And at one point, General Flynn took out a diagram that supposedly showed IP addresses all over the world, and who was communicating with whom via the machines, and some comment about like Nest thermostats being hooked up to the internet.
So it's been reported that during this meeting, Ms. Powell talked about Dominion voting machines and made various election fraud claims that involve foreign countries such as Venezuela, Iran, and China. Is that accurate?
Sure.
Was the meeting tense?
Oh, yeah. It was not a casual meeting.
Explain.
I mean, at times there were people shouting at each other, hurling insults at each other. It wasn't just sort of people sitting around on the couch, like chit-chatting.
Do you recall whether he raised to Ms. Powell the fact that she and the campaign had lost all of the 60 cases that they had brought in litigation?
Yes, he raised that.
And what was the response?
I don't remember what she said. I don't think it was a good response.
Cipollone and Hirschman and whoever the other guy was showed nothing but contempt and disdain of the president.
Yeah, I remember the three of them were really sort of forcefully attacking me verbally. Derek, and we were pushing back, and we were asking one simple question as a general matter. Where is the evidence? So,
what response did you get when you asked Ms. Powell and her colleagues, where's the
evidence? A variety of responses based on my current recollection, including, can't believe you would say something like, things like this, like, what do you mean, where's the evidence? You should know, and things like that, or, a disregard, I would say, a general disregard for the importance of actually backing up what you say with facts.
And, then there was discussion of, well, we don't have it now, but we will have it or whatever.
I mean, if it had been me sitting in his chair, I would have fired all of them that night and had them escorted out of the building.
Derek and I both challenged what she was saying. And She says, well, the judges are corrupt. And I was like, everyone? Every single case that you've done in the country you guys lost, every one of them is corrupt, even the ones we appointed? And I'm being nice. I was much more harsh to her.
So one of the other things that's been reported that was said during this meeting was that President Trump told White House lawyers, Mr. Hirschman and Mr. Cipollone, that they weren't offering him any solutions, but Ms. Powell and others were. So why not try what Ms. Powell and others were proposing? Do you remember anything along those lines being said by President Trump?
I do. That sounds right.
I think that it got to the point where the screaming was completely out there. I mean, you get people walk in, it was late at night, it had been a long day, and what they were proposing, I thought was nuts.
I'm gonna categorically describe it as, you guys are not tough enough. Or maybe I put it another way, you're a bunch of pussies. Excuse the expression, but I'm almost certain the word was used.
Flynn screamed at me that I was a quitter and everything, kept on standing up and turning around and screaming at me. And at a certain point, I had it with him. So I yelled back. I had to come over, or sit your effing ass back down.
The president and the White House team went upstairs to the residence, but to the public part of the residence, the big parlor where you can have meetings in the conference room.
Oval? They call it the yellow oval?
Yes, exactly, the yellow oval office. I always called it the upper. And I'm not exactly sure where the Sydney group went. I think maybe the Roosevelt room. And I stayed in the cabinet room, which is kind of cool. I really like that. All by myself.
At the end of the day, we landed where we started the meeting, at least from a structural standpoint, which was Sidney Powell was fighting, Mike Flynn was fighting. They were looking for avenues that would result in President Trump remaining President Trump for a second term.
The meeting finally ended after midnight. Here are text messages sent by Cassidy Hutchinson during and after the meeting. As you can see, Ms. Hutchinson reported that the meeting in the West Wing was unhinged. The meeting finally broke up after midnight. During the early morning of December 19, Cassidy Hutchinson captured the moment of Mark Meadows escorting Rudy Giuliani off the White House grounds to, quote, make sure he didn't wander back into the mansion. Certain accounts of this meeting indicate that President Trump actually granted Ms. Powell's security clearance and appointed her to a somewhat ill-defined position of special counsel.
All right, y'all, we got more. Stephen Ayers at Races, he was with the Oath Keepers. He talked about really what they really are. Sometimes we say, get the popcorn. I'm like, no, we gotta get the salad. So please, show more.
Mr. Van Tatenhove, can you help us understand who the Oath Keepers are?
I can, thank you. My time with the Oath Keepers began back at Bundy Ranch with that first standoff when I went to cover them as an independent journalist. I then subsequently covered two more standoffs, the Sugar Pine Mine standoff and the White Hope Mine standoff. It was at that time that I was offered a job as national media director and an associate editor for the webpage. So I spent a few years with the Oath Keepers, and I can tell you that they may not like to call themselves a militia, but they are. They're a violent militia, and they are largely Stuart Rhodes. And I think, rather than try to use words, I think the best illustration for what the Oath Keepers are happened January 6th, when we saw that stacked military formation going up the stairs of our Capitol. I saw radicalization that started with my beginning of my time with them and continued over a period of time as the member base and who it was that Stuart Rhodes was courting drifted further and further right into the alt-right world, into white nationalists, and even straight up racists. And it came to a point where I could no longer continue to work for them. But the Oath Keepers are a dangerous militia that is in large part fed by the ego and drive of Stuart Rhodes, who at times seemed to see himself as this paramilitary leader. I think that drove a lot of it. So, in my opinion, the Oath Keepers are a very dangerous organization.
Well, thank you very much.
So Brad Parscale, who ran Donald Trump's campaign, he was texting a little shoplifter, Katrina Pierce, you know, the crazy black woman. If you want to see how they really feel about letting that fool get in the White House, listen to how they broke down what he tweeted, what he texted.
Trump's former manager, Brad Parscale, recognized the impact of the speech immediately. And this is what he said on January 6th in excerpts from text messages to Katrina Pearson. Mr. Parscale said, quote, "This is about Trump pushing for uncertainty in our country, a sitting president asking for civil war." And then when he said, "This week I feel guilty for helping him win," Katrina Pearson responded, "You did what you felt right at the time, and therefore it was right." Mr. Parscale added, "Yeah, but a woman is dead. And yeah, if I was Trump and I knew my rhetoric killed someone." When Ms. Pearson replied, "It wasn't the rhetoric," Mr. Parscale said, "Katrina, yes, it was." Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. President Trump's former campaign manager, Brad Parscale, recognized the impact of the speech immediately. And this is what he said on January 6th in excerpts from text messages to Katrina Pearson.
Jason, any Republican who continues to stand with this man is an absolute idiot and, frankly, a traitor to the country. You're on mute.
I agree 100%. What terrifies me is that I don't think that, if this had happened 30 years ago, the entire country would have been fixated on it. There would not have even been a discussion about Donald Trump potentially being president in 2024. But here we are, where people choose what they want to pay attention to, what they think is relevant, whom they believe. Even with a mountain of evidence in their face, they find some sort of cognitive dissonance in order to dismiss it. And we could very well, unfortunately, although the polls say that Biden beats Trump narrowly, and that Vice President Kamala Harris, if she is thrust into that role, beats Trump narrowly, that we could have another Trump presidency. To me, that's terrifying. And I think you're going to see, a lot of these people who have testified to the truth, they're going to be torn down. They're going to be torn apart. They're going to be called rhinos. And it's really a unique time in history. And I don't know exactly what the future holds, but it's terrifying that people aren't paying attention to this. I think you are. I think I am. I think the other panelists are. I think your viewers are. But there are millions upon millions of people who actually still believe, despite all of this evidence, despite the words of the people who were involved in this attempt to overthrow democracy, they still believe the election was stolen. I don't know what the answer to that is. And that's what's terrifying as an American.
Well, Teresa, the only way you deal with that is for the Attorney General Merrick Garland to begin to indict folks, including Donald Trump, and hopefully that this grand jury in Atlanta will indict him, indict Lindsey Graham and others who chose to overthrow the election because they were pissed off that black people voted in Atlanta, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Detroit.
You're absolutely right. This is where the justice system actually takes its place, and not only American democracy, but also the law. And so, looking forward to hearing those rollouts. I think right after the January 6th hearings, we should be hearing what some of those charges are looking like. I think it was definitely a shock factor of what's been happening with some of the subpoenas that's been coming out. But it looks like people are now changing their minds and starting to change their story. And they're understanding that, look, Trump actually lost. And thus there is no more backing. And we have to figure out what our next steps is. Sometimes it's just not a book or a podcast. Sometimes it's just telling the truth and shaming the devil.
Mustafa, it's very simple. These people cannot be near anywhere elected office, and there must be far more aggressive action being taken against everyone involved.
Without a doubt. It's interesting what Jason and Teresa shared. All of that is correct, but it's even deeper than that. You got to really understand the dynamics that are playing out. Trump wanted to have a civil war, if you will, and he felt that he could control that civil war and that he would be the only one who would be able to stop it. So then folks would gravitate once again to him and see him as a savior. So let's unpack that a bit further. We know that when you're looking at folks like the Oath Keepers and these other groups, the Proud Boys, there are over 300 militia organizations in the United States of America right now today. That's the conservative number. There are 20,000 members who are part of that. We also know that folks who participated in the January 6th insurrection brought guns, and now we've also heard testimony that there were explosives that were a part of that. So when you have that depth of planning, that folks were very serious about this, but they knew that they couldn't do it by themselves, so they needed folks inside the White House and other politicians to be able to achieve the goals that they have had for a long time. If you go and look at their manifestos and these other types of things, they're very clear about the things they want to do.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches. I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?